Here we have 2.2 tons of Munich's latest SUV coupe. That being, of course, the BMW X6. In this review, I'm going to take you through all the big and the little details that make this a truly special car. My name's Tom, and you're watching Paragon Cars. Let's go. Now, the big things. Of course, the first big thing, well, it's the car itself. It's absolutely massive in person. The previous X6 was no small car, but this new model is bigger in nearly every single way. Next up, we have the glow-in-the-dark grille. I know some BMWs have gone way too far with the size of their grille, 7 Series, but I think for an SUV, the size actually works quite well. They keep closed most of the time to aid aero, but when the car's hot, they open up to cool the engine. Then to power this behemoth down the road, you have the mighty B58 inline-6. An engine mostly used in sportier BMWs now sits in the lap of luxury. It might seem odd to put such a sporty engine in what is supposed to be a relaxing and refined car, but there is one major reason for that we'll get onto later. Power is at 340 HP and torque is at an impressive 450 Newton meters. They say the 0 to 60 is dealt with in just 5.2 seconds, but how does it compare to the other cars we've tested in the 30 to 70 sprint? Let's find out. So, how did we do? Well, as you can see, we managed a time of just 5.03 seconds. That puts it ahead of the Mark III Ford Focus RS, and it just goes to show how strong this B58 inline-6 is. It truly amazes me that this engine can beat a hot hatch, even though it's been put in a 2.2 ton SUV. The inside is what houses the smaller details. The main attraction for me is the crystal-covered centre console. Not only does it look expensive, it feels expensive. There's now substantial weight in something that is usually just a bit of plastic. And for me, it's like drinking a fine wine out of a thin lead crystal glass instead of, well, a plastic cup. Attention to detail doesn't stop there though. The seats cater to your exact needs. Being able to adjust the pitch of the upper back makes more of a difference than you'd think. There's then the display key. I could do a whole video on this feature alone, but the main takeaway for me is being able to warm or cool the car to the desired temperature before entry. In terms of the big features, the infotainment is taken up by two massive 12.3-inch displays. The latest iDrive is of course better than ever, and with other manufacturers moving to touchscreen only options, it's so refreshing to be able to control things how I want to. There's then a large panoramic roof that houses what BMW call the Sky Lounge. It lights up with your chosen colour at night, and it makes this car feel truly unique to travel in. In the rear, you might think that the coupe body shape makes it feel cramped, but remember, this car is still fundamentally massive. There's plenty of room for legs and heads, and believe you me, those heads and legs will be very comfortable back here. Each seat is heated and also has its own zone of climate control. There's then an armrest with storage to lose your iPhone in, and a fold-away cup holder that fits almost any drink. Take a trip to the boot and you'll find a healthy 580 litres of space, easily big enough for 4 large suitcases. But if you ever need to carry a small town, then you can fold the seats down and open the boot up to a whopping 1,530 litres. Let's now find out how this big boy handles some British roads. So driving then, we're going to start off round town, move on to the motorway, and then do some twisty road driving. This is a BMW after all, so it should handle well. But to describe the way this car feels inside, you know, after you've had a big meal and you go to sit down on a sofa, get a blanket on and watch one of your favourite films, This is what sitting in this car is like. It is so comfortable. This car is fitted with dynamic air suspension, and in comfort mode, which is the mode we're in now, it just feels so compliant, yet still controlled. Apologies if you can hear any noise in the background. I've got quite a lot of camera equipment in the back. And not only is the suspension soft, the steering is the lightest I have ever felt in a car. It's even lighter than the previous gen Mercedes S-Class I drove a while ago. I mean, it's like driving a bed almost. So how does this BMW X6 deal with parking then? Well, despite being an absolutely massive car, the turning circle is actually pretty good. Plus, you've got a whole host of features to help you out. So not only do you have a reverse camera that will actually change the angle as you turn the steering wheel, you have a complete 3D 360 camera system in this car. And it allows you to see every single angle you need to. You can use gesture control to move around the car as well, but as you can see, it doesn't work most of the time for me. My favourite view is just the normal parking view. And getting into a space is pretty easy, because you've got the combination of the reverse camera and actually the overhead overlay. It means you can actually just look straight at the screen without paying attention to pretty much any of your surroundings. And you do actually need that, because the view out the back is atrocious in this car. That's purely because it's just a coupe body shape. Pretty much every coupe SUV has really poor rearward visibility. But let's say you go forwards into a space. What happens then? So let's say you see the only space left in the supermarket car park. You can press this button and drive straight in. But now someone's parked next to you and it's really difficult to get out. All you have to do, put the car in reverse, and it will do the rest for you. No need to remember how you drove the car in. Pretty neat feature. And it'll actually remember up to 50 meters of driving. Coming out of junctions, even though the engine is off, I can come off the brake and the engine is just ready to go straight away. The ZF 8-speed gearbox combined with this B58 inline 6 just make this like a buttery smooth experience to drive in. Okay, I've reset the trip computer now to see what MPG we can get on the motorway. Of course, the less times you have to fill up, the better. And I think you may be surprised just how efficient a big SUV like this can be. Before we get on the motorway, let's see what a 2.2 ton SUV feels like in the corners. We're going to go for sports mode. I'm going to knock my slightly obnoxious but very beautiful crystal gear knob into sports mode. You can hear the B58 waking up a bit. There's a bit more throttle response. The steering has a bit more artificial weight to it. And I can use these surprisingly good quality gear shift paddles to change gear. And this car, as you saw earlier, really has some get up and go. It's a beautiful drivetrain in this vehicle. For now, we're going to go into Eco Pro and see what MPG we can get on the motorway. One word I think doesn't actually come up often enough in car reviews is drivability. And what I mean by that is how a car responds to your input. Does it do exactly what you want it to do, or does it do something else? And the biggest thing for me has always been throttle input. A lot of cars, when you put them in sports, eco, whatever, they either feel too responsive or they just do nothing. Whereas this B58 combined with that ZF 8-speed, it just blends the gears together, and there's so much torque low down from this engine that when you give it a little bit of throttle, it gives you exactly the amount of acceleration you want. So what about things like road noise and wind noise? Well, somehow BMW have removed road noise from this car. We're riding on 21-inch wheels, and as far as I can tell, any speed below 70 miles an hour, there is zero road noise. Then wind noise is also kept to an absolute minimum. Their previous car was very good, but you still had this little bit of whistling coming from the wing mirrors. Audi have always been really good at getting rid of wind noise in their cars, but BMW with this latest X6 are actually on par with Audi's Q8. And then in terms of comfort on the motorway, obviously it's very comfortable, as I mentioned before, but this car really is the next level when it comes to comfort. Being able to adjust the pitch of the bass and then the pitch of the upper backrest just means you can get the perfect position that you're used to sitting in. And that, combined with effortlessly light steering and suspension that just irons out almost every single bump in the road, means this is a car I could do a 14-hour journey in, get out and feel more refreshed than when I got in. And then the next thing that has actually really impressed me is their interior quality. BMWs have always been okay, but sometimes they've had parts that just don't quite fit together so well. Like sometimes a lot of their brush metal trim will have quite large gaps between itself and the leather. Whereas in this car, everything feels so solid and well put together. Now we come to BMW's version of the virtual cockpit. And I have to say, whilst it's not as flashy or customizable as Audi's or Mercedes' system, it's still really good, but in its own way. It's quite a lot darker than its competitors' displays, and it just means it doesn't distract you when you're driving down a road. Yet, it still displays all the information you'd ever need. There's also an absolutely fantastic heads-up display in this car, which if I crouch down you might be able to see. It's one of the brighter ones I've used, and it's certainly much sharper than the one BMW used in their older cars. You've then got some specs that I would deem essential in a car like this. And the first one is that massive panoramic sunroof that I mentioned in the intro. It lets a lot more light in, and it makes what is actually quite a closed-off cabin feel much more airy and bright inside. And of course the addition of that Sky Lounge feature looks absolutely amazing at night. You've then got the really impressive Harman Kardon sound system. BMWs of the past, to be honest, had pretty pants sound systems, even the upgraded models. But this latest system in this BMW X6 is so impressive. The bass is fantastic, pretty much all the way to full volume. Gets a tiny bit mushy right at the top, but I'm nitpicking really. The mids are totally clear and the highs are totally clear as well. And then there's one hidden feature that I didn't actually mention in the intro. And no, it's not a wireless charger. It's actually heated and cooled cup holders. Now this is something I thought would be a complete gimmick in like any car. But in this, the cooling function works amazingly well. You can literally refrigerate a drink to like 5 degrees in this car. And it means when you're doing a longer journey, that £5 bottle of Coke you bought from a Shell station is still cold. Coming off the motorway then, we managed an astonishing 34 miles to the gallon. And it's actually still going up. I think on a longer run, you could get 36 to 38 out of this car. It's absolutely insane how a 2.2 ton SUV can get the same economy as a small hatchback did like 12-15 years ago. Okay, let's see how this big car handles some small British B roads. So for some B roads, I'm going to go for sports mode, funnily enough, and then I'm going to tighten the bolsters on my seat a bit so I don't flop around in the corners. Put the gearbox over into sports mode, and I'm going to change the gears manually, I think. And this X6 somehow wraps itself around you and becomes something that it really shouldn't be. Thing is, you don't really get much of a sense of speed because you're so high up. Whoa, there's some nice rear drive bias coming out that corner there. And this actually has quite a nice sound to it as well. Of course, it is an M Performance engine, so it is going to sound good anyway. The only thing you do notice is the ESC kicks in quite early, because it's like, oh, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be driving this SUV quickly. But coming out of tight corners like that, you can really feel the rear axle push you around the corner. And then you have the steering, whilst it doesn't have that much feel, it is precise enough to actually make this car feel quite sporty to drive. And again, this B58 motor is just so strong. Even in a car this big and this heavy, it still feels like it's got plenty of punch to give. And the adaptive suspension just keeps this car absolutely flat through the corners. I mean, we went 60 miles an hour through there, and the car just did it like it was nothing. It's really not far off what a hot hatch could do. And then you've got absolutely massive brake rotors, and they slow the car down so well. My only minor niggle would be that the brake feel isn't quite as sharp as I'd like it to be. But when you need them, they are really there. But let's go back into comfort, as this is the mode you're going to want to spend most of your time in this car. So what's my overall verdict on the BMW X6 40i then? Well, surprisingly, I would say out of all the X6 models to get, I think this is the one you should buy. It's got plenty of power, it drives like a diesel when you want it to, e.g. it responds quickly, has really good drivability. But because it's not a diesel engine, it's also got quite a nice sound, and it is actually fun to drive on a B road. I don't think you actually need the more powerful M50i or X6M. I know a lot of journalists have said the M versions of these cars are way too stiffly sprung, and the 50i version is the one to go for. But if you want to save the planet just a little bit, I think this is the perfect car. On the motorway, managing to get well over 30 miles to the gallon means you can drive this car nearly 800 miles before you have to fill up, and it's a petrol. And when it comes to livability as well, I really don't see a downside. This car is large, yes, you get used to the size, and you're thinking, oh, because of the coupe body shape, there's not going to be quite as much room. Okay, there isn't quite as much room. I can still fit behind myself in my driving position and feel totally comfortable in the back of this car. Still got plenty of headroom, plenty of leg room, and the boot is still absolutely massive, and I really struggle to think what you wouldn't be able to fit in there. You know, the biggest thing we carry every year is probably something like a Christmas tree or a fridge. So I think if you're in the market for a big SUV, you should really consider buying this car. For me, this is on par with the Audi Q8 or even the Mercedes GLS, even though I know the direct competitor is the GLE Coupe. Anyway, we're nearly back at the dealership now, so I think I'll wrap the video up here. As always, if you like the video, give it a like, and why not subscribe to our channel? Not only will you see more videos like this one, you'll also be able to see all the stock we have for sale, including this behemoth of a car. As always, my name's Tom, and you've been watching Paragon Cars. I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.